IVM.
Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Uncle Please Sit Pandemic Edition. I'm Joel Pereira and with me is my co-host Tushar Abhichandani. How's it going, Tushar?
It's going good, as well as it can go in the middle of a pandemic.
And we are recording on a day, like at least now we are both, Tushar and me at least are in Maharashtra state. And we are specifically in Bombay. And it looks like this lockdown is just never going to end, right?
It's a lost cause. It's like this. Again, they've added 144A or something. And so...
Yeah, Section 144A in Bombay City, apparently.
Apparently, you can't get out beyond 2 kilometers of your house.
There's that. Which is why we are doing these things instead of recording in our lovely studio at IVM. We are now doing this over Zoom.
That's also because,
of course, with us,
we will not do it in our studio.
With us today, we also have a guest. He's a lawyer and the executive director of the Internet Freedom Foundation. Apar Gupta, sorry. Welcome to Uncle Please Sit. Apar, how's it going?
It's going well, Joel, Tushar. I'm excited to be here and chat with you. And just one thing, since we'll be talking about bad jokes and the name of the show is Uncle Please Sit, I'll start with Uncle joke, please, if I can.
Yes,
we are not in the middle of a pandemic. If we go by what the government has been up to with the 59 hours, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Okay? Please don't laugh. If you're laughing, you're a horrible person and have really poor taste. Okay? But that's my uncle joke. We'll just start out and just kill the number of users who will be tuning into your platform.
The Internet Freedom
Foundation
is not helping us clearly.
And thank you for setting the tone of this episode.
But in a way, this is good.
Bad jokes.
In a way, this is good. Yeah. In a way, this is good because we've set the bar very low. So लोग बिना expectation के ही आएंगे.
Just wait, Apar. You know, Apar is Tushar. Apar and I go back a certain certain ways, because when we were doing our show on air with AIB, I was running editorial on that show, right? And obviously we were dealing with a lot of, it was AIB and it was on the internet, and we were dealing with some controversial issues. And Apar was the guy who was basically, his brief to him was, Apar, please keep us out of jail. Basically, that was sort of Apar's duty on when, like, Apar was when we contacted Apar and we said, hey man, we need like a legal bodyguard, so to speak, and we need you to go through our scripts. We need you to like vet all our jokes, and you basically need to keep us out of jail as long as
legal health workers.
Yeah. I was the personal protection kit.
नहीं, वो Indian team का physio होता है ना. So you were the legal physio.
हाँ, बिल्कुल.
Injure मत होना. Just do.
देखो, मतलब sometimes the job of a lawyer is also to work as a placebo. Okay, so here's the thing. It's a very fine line, and there was found well. But here's the thing. When you work with comics, you can't kill their art, and at the same point of time, a lot of the Indian laws we have are so subjective. Yeah, you basically are risking, and then you are assessing the level of risk each joke and the larger narrative can cause. Yeah. So it's not about the law; it's about them just getting a really friendly visit from the local police thana.
No, and it must be sometimes when you look at a law, you're like, I think I know this law and I think I know the precedents. But जज का मूड अगर नहीं हुआ तो फिर कुछ और भी हो सकता है.
हाँ, बिल्कुल. आप बिल्कुल सही बोल रहे हैं. तो जो लॉ स्कूल आइडियलिज्म होता है ना, वो and the really nice textbooks which we have, freedom of speech freedom of speech wo, okay, in its practice, and like there is a deeper shade of gray. Matlab, the black letter of the law, which is on the books, it's very subjective, yeah.
No, this happened to me with journalism also. I studied journalism, and then journalism school, you're like, ये करेंगे, देश बदलेंगे, दुनिया बदलेंगे, and we'll have all these principles, and then you go to a newsroom and you're like, oh.
तुषार बदल तो दिया. तुषार तुमने बदल दिया है. तुम जर्नलिस्ट थे और हम वकीलों ने, we have changed the world. We need to stop changing it.
I'm not sure it's for the good. So, since we have you here today, Apar, so I'm going to tell our audience that the topic for today is drum roll. Joel, give fake drum roll. Okay, not giving fake drum roll.
Badum dum dish.
Yeah, okay. It's freedom of expression.
Or as you see on the internet, FOE.
FOE. So we're going to be talking about FOE. We're going to be talking about what it means, what it revolves around, how it's practiced on the ground in India and various countries, and just a whole 360-degree view of it. We're going to be doing that right after this really short break.
Hey everybody, welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money and Intel. Their support makes this content possible. So, been a really exciting week on the network this week. We've had some really cool stuff. My old friend Vivek Lad was on Storytellers and Storysellers. Definitely do check that out. On Cyrus Said, we had Ashwin Sanghi on Thursday's episode, and Cyrus and myself did a cock and bull, just the two of us. That was fun as well on Monday. Do check that out. Masaba was on Advertising is Dead, which was another really, really strong episode from Varun. And on the sports front, both Edges and Sledges, Football Shitball had some really fun episodes. That's the Football Twaddle. Do check those out as well. And if you haven't been paying attention and you haven't been listening to Smile India in these times, I don't know why you aren't. It's the most uplifting show that you could listen to. It's a short, bite-sized piece of really positive things that happen in India. Do definitely check that out. And with that, let's get you back to your show.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Uncle Please Sit. I don't know why I'm doing this like the intro of the show, but deal with it. So as we told you, we have a very special guest today, Apar Gupta, lawyer and director of, I'm getting the designation wrong. Executive
Director of the Internet Freedom Foundation.
And of course, as always, we have Joel also. Not to downgrade his presence. So today we're going to be talking, as I said, we're going to be talking about freedom of expression. So let's just start off with the definition. Apar, what is the basic definition of freedom of expression?
I think the foundational definition of freedom of expression is a person's right to express their thoughts, their beliefs, their practices in script as well as in words. And over a period of time, it's meant several things through cases. It's also meant the right of people to remain silent, which is under a compelled speech doctrine, that you can't be compelled to say something. And it's also gone towards conduct, for instance. Hey, I can paint that. I can draw that. I can, for instance, even burn that. Okay, in something. I'm not going to say what's that. It may be a flag, right? But
yeah.
So Texas versus Johnson is that case. Sometimes conduct has become speech as a denominator, but traditionally it's just meant that it's a very basic human freedom. Because do you notice something? When we talk, we think, and when we can't talk, sometimes our thinking stops of a specific kind. Of course, we can think in other ways. So sometimes the expression builds on top of each other to allow the greater diversity of voices, human learning and advancement. So at the root of freedom of speech and expression is a larger social objective of advancing knowledge, advancing culture, and that only starts with people being free to express what they think, what they believe in works of art, fiction, journalism, as well as prime-time television. I don't know what that is.
So basically, I can say what I want, at least at the core of it. As an individual, I have the right to say what I want, draw what I want, write what I want, and essentially assemble. I mean, no, wait, is the right to assembly different, right?
Yeah, you can remix. That's also a part of the.
Oh, that's also part of it.
Yeah,
so
Like even freedom of the press is covered under freedom of expression only, right?
So the ability to write what you can, publish what you want.
Yeah, it's a fairly broad right. Yeah. So the thing is, its breadth is so wide because we human beings are creative and they find different ways of expressing them.
when speech or when expression is curtailed, right? There's always some reason that people put forward that either it's national security, or it's public interest, or it's obscenity, or it's privacy, or it's whatever. There's always something there. We obviously in India do not have what is referred to as absolute freedom of speech. First of all, is absolute freedom of speech even a thing?
No, it's nowhere there globally. In fact, there are misapprehensions that even the United States has absolute freedom of speech. There are very well carved out exceptions to the First Amendment as it exists and operates in the United States. For instance, people know about the Justin Timberlake incident, where in the Super Bowl he revealed a part of the upper body of Janet Jackson, and there was a massive fine which was imposed on the broadcasters.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
there are also provisions for certain kinds of fighting words, quote unquote, which inspire people to basically punch the other person. I wonder what they would be. But yeah, I wouldn't try them out right now. But yeah, there's a long line of precedent, and there's nothing called absolute freedom of speech. That's like saying, I don't even think Osho would be on board for absolute freedom of speech. Yeah,
I'm assuming America would come closest.
Yeah, but America comes closest because it recognizes a very different political reality from, let's say, Europe or the developing world, because it says that when you create restrictions on free expression, they're usually for the benefit of groups which don't have power. For instance, minorities who lack power in society will be the traditional beneficiaries of hate speech protections, right? That you can't go out and disparage them. Right? You have that law in India. That benefit minorities. Why? It does not benefit minorities because the operation of the law is dependent on people who are usually cisgendered, upper caste males who are dominating the system and happen to be Hindu.
Yeah.
Right? So from the it will either be the regional dominant personality, or in the Supreme Court, and this is not contemptuous, it's based on data, it will be an upper caste male judge. So your own identity by itself then determines how that law will operate. So the operational apparatus of the entire state, right, is the practical reality. It's the pragmatism of the law. And this is why the Americans say, yeah, we can make hate speech laws, but can we ensure that the beneficiaries of that law will actually get to avail it and counterintuitively not be put to risk by false prosecutions of that same law? And I know this is a view which is predominantly there with the US scholars, but on its opposite side, there's also increasing scholarship by people such as Jeremy Waldron, who say that hate speech needs to be recognized, because what happens in hate speech is that you gradually chip away at the dignity of people, where you stop viewing them socially and individually as human beings. You look them as B-class persons who don't have the full rights that you do, and then it's a blow away from the kind of communal violence which happens on the basis of that disparagement which has occurred over a long period of time.
The conflict,
it's a bit complex, but this is the US context here. We are following a much more European context in India, a much more what I'll call and lawyers call the ICCPR context, जिसके अंदर there are large exceptions to free expression.
No, so basically the conundrum is this: okay, you either have a US system where they're like, we have a feeling that even if we have hate speech laws, the people who are implementing them, there's a good chance that they will not be able to implement them properly, or we will essentially end up creating a system where it's being misused. Or there's the European philosophy where you're like, you need these systems, as flawed as they might be, because that's the only way that you can protect people who are sort of underprivileged. Would that be like a basic summation of it?
Yeah, yeah. And the thing in Europe is it comes from the history of Nazism and the Second World War. So
Yeah.
if you go to Germany and you discover really interesting things. That sense of national guilt which is there, social recognition that they have been aggressors in the past and they need to be mindful in terms of building a much more multicultural society, which is also very evident when the migration was taking place from after that entire civil war in the Middle East in several countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the thing is that our laws need to be reflective of the reality. But the thing is, who's going to make these laws? Again, the same people, right?
So I'm thinking this.
Yeah, because I believe in a lot of countries in Europe, for instance, like I'm sure it's Germany. I'm pretty sure it's also the Netherlands and Denmark, where Holocaust denialism is illegal, right?
Exactly. And in fact, because it fuels the alt-right, and there are very, very good studies how it's done. The second thing is even the sale of Nazi memorabilia, certain imagery is prohibited. Now people say, that impinges on my freedom of speech and expression. But boss, it's all contextual. Let's always remember that, right? We can't depart from our space in history and say, freedom of speech. So the quote usually attributed to Oliver Wendell Holmes is that you cannot falsely shout fire in a crowded theater.
Yeah.
Because what does it do? It creates a stampede.
Yeah.
We need to think beyond it. It's not the speech, it's the impact it has about. Right? And falsely shouting fire is raising alarm to such a degree where it will cause injury.
So we in India, if I'm right, we have Article 19, which guarantees some amount of freedom of expression, right? Apar, could you tell us more about that a little bit?
Yeah, so, there's a very interesting book by Kannibaram, and he was earlier a commercial litigator who then became a lawyer for labor rights, and he was also the head of the People's Union for Civil Liberties, the preeminent civil society organization. So he wrote this book called Wages of Servitude, and he says that when the Constitution was adopted and Nehru was reading his midnight with Children of Midnight speech, independence was happening. The founder of the United Coffee House was sitting in a jail for pamphlets that he wrote, and that's A.K. Gopalan. So freedom of speech has always been a complex topic in which the Constitution exists, but it serves existing privilege and classes who have social learning and economic wealth. And it's also important to recognize that Constitution does not create the fundamental freedom to freedom of speech and expression. It's a recognition of that. This is a natural right. So when we are born, like buck naked, we are born with certain rights. Okay, and the Constitution is a framework which puts it in text and helps direct the focus of the state towards achieving it. So the fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression is contained under Article 19(1)(a) as a recognition of our natural right. That's number one, a fairly complex idea that why the Constitution is not the end stop and why we are born with it. Second, complexity in its practice is there. Has it been amended in the past? Yes, it has been amended, especially with respect to another article. It is called Article 19(2), which we hear about so often, reasonable restrictions. So just like Tushar and you were bringing it up, FOE, right? All those online debates we have on social media. One person says, this is my FOE. And the next person says, no, this is reasonable restriction. Well, reasonable restrictions are basically grounds to the government to make laws. They are not laws by themselves. So the thing is, we have a fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression, and the government has about 6 to 7 grounds under which it can make legislation or executive orders. It can't directly say तुम ये नहीं बोल सकते, or you can't say that. But it can make a law to direct the blocking of websites. So the thing is, it needs clearly an act of parliament, and there are certain prescribed conditions. These prescribed conditions are there, for instance, in the security and integrity of India, defamation, public order, etc., etc., etc. And facing all of that up is one very important word, and that word is reasonable. And who judges what is reasonable is quite often asked. And I say, well, it's usually a court, because when somebody goes and challenges a law, like Arnab just did, his FIRs in the Bombay High Court, what did the court assess? Is the restriction which is placed on him in terms of filing of that FIR reasonable? And then they come to their conclusion, whether it's reasonable or it's unreasonable based on several legal doctrines. For instance, do the facts which are disclosed with regard to the statement match the offense? Or is the offense even covered by the substantive grounds, those 7 grounds, security and integrity of India, blah, 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 all of that. But here, the thing to remember is, one, natural rights, we are born with it. Okay, so own it. The second is that the fundamental freedom is a recognition in the constitution of what is already there. Third, it can be restricted through legislation or by laws, but it needs to be reasonable. And who judges reasonable? Usually the courts.
So, with regards to, first of all, what is your opinion on these reasonable restrictions? Because I hear a lot of people hate them because they seem to be very broad and vague. And the governments also make sure that the laws that they create are often vague enough for them to get away with a lot of things. So, what especially the one thing that one of these restrictions that I find the weirdest is friendly relations with a foreign nation, which to me sounds very weird, where like you can restrict my speech because the government of China is not happy with what I have to say, which they use against the Tibetan activists a fair amount.
Yeah, they do all the time. Yeah.
So, I mean, what is your view on these restrictions? Because some of
and the Tibetan activists, what do? They want to show the flag of Tibet when the Chinese ambassador or the premier is passing by.
Yeah.
So they're ridiculous. I'm on page with you. But here's the thing. I think a large part of that blame falls not due to the constitution or the people who drafted it. It just falls to the moral cowardice of people who implement these laws. Right? So it includes our parliamentarians, includes our judges who make small compromises. ठीक है यार, इधर थोड़ा 19-20 कर लेते हैं. We can adjust a little here. But here's the thing. You create systematic flaws. So if Kedarnath goes to the Supreme Court and argues that sedition is unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court upholds sedition to be constitutional and says, these are guidelines we're laying down, these are directions. Ordinarily, even abusing the government is not sedition because you need to do an act prejudicial to the country, not to the government and this person. But you practically know, if you abuse one particular man at this point in time in this very country, what will happen to you? Consequences are very clear to even journalists who are now running around the Supreme Court. For instance, there's a case in which when Indira Gandhi was assassinated on the square of Chandigarh, I think 3 pro-Khalistani activists stood and said, Raj Karega Khalsa. Okay. And there were certain provisions, including sedition, placed on them. And the court said, what is this nonsense? This is not sedition. So the thing is, like to say, we're a very mature, strong, modern, confident, assertive democracy. But these actions display a very weak sense of insecurity that you can't handle any kind of design. So the practice and operation of the law and the reasonable restrictions is a legitimate headache your friends have.
Oh, man. That does not sound like fun.
It is not fun. Unless you are doing, again, script and content review. Thank you so much, Joel.
There is the government angle towards freedom of expression and the restriction to freedom of expression. What about the private angle to it? Like, for example, if I'm working in a company and then the company has a problem with me expressing certain kinds of views. Or like there's the famous case of Colin Kaepernick in the NFL who kneeled for the Black Lives Matter movement. And so how does freedom of expression work in the private domain?
So the thing is that the private domain is a bit complex because India does not have a Civil Rights Act, number one. So, you have all these weird rules also that you can't enter this club wearing a t-shirt and your chappals and all that kind of stuff. So the thing is the private establishments are like also having a free-for-all because the labor legislation also pretty much doesn't apply to contract-based work in which a lot of white-collar people work. And usually they make you enter into very severe conditions, and these days they have a social media policy also, what you can say, what you can't say online, and the minute you say something which impacts or undermines the company, very vaguely worded contract boss, by the way, okay, you get one call from HR, hello, and etc., all of that, okay. Meanwhile, your boss will be sharing the most like wonderful stuff on Facebook and forwarding everything to like in their personal lives to the WhatsApp group. Okay, this has nothing to do with my own experiences working with different people. Okay, but clearly, here's the thing: the private sector has more breadth in terms of determining what kinds of action it can take and environments that can provide, and what constitutes that level of permissibility to your speech. So we are talking about employers, for instance, where the power equation is very different. But think about that some like weird person with a very extreme belief that that houses should not have any kind of woodwork in them because there are very extreme form of environmentalists wants to get into your house and wants to basically make sure and have a conversation about you not using any kind of wood and like decreasing your carbon footprint to minus 20,000 to compensate for everything that you have done till today. Joel, I'm looking at you. Okay. So, yeah. Yeah. But here's the thing. You'll say that, boss, I'm not interested in that conversation. Is it legitimate for that person to say, oh no, this is my freedom of speech and expression. You're restricting it. You're not being reasonable. And you're not acting under law. So here's the thing. Speech and expression and these fundamental rights are part of what is called Part 3 of the Constitution, which ideally and usually do apply in a context which applies to public authorities, which includes state entities as well as people who get a lot of money from the government, effectively making the government control them. Okay, it doesn't apply to private people per se. But you can theoretically argue that people who are licensed like schools, colleges, apartment complex societies, maybe who get free land, okay, or subsidized land, they may fall within this boundary, but not so much.
But so the private space does not fall within that.
Yeah, more or less, which is also why the online platforms, if you look at it, right? People say, oh, Twitter violated my Article 19.1A.
Yeah, this
right?
is your next question. What happens when you're on a Twitter or a Facebook?
Yeah, Facebook is not respecting our right to assembly, guys. Like, what should we do? And there's a legitimate problem there. I'll tell you why. Because I come from this domain, I study it. So the thing is that there are so few places actually that you can aggregate a certain amount of attention to the kind of work that you do, the cause that you do, the business that you run, or even the kind of photographs that you take, which may be very bad, okay? But you just want like a lot of likes, right? Where do you go? You go to about 5 or 6 platforms and they're central repositories. So there's a lot of attention, of people, of traction, of geographies. It just has all that traffic. Like Instagram has that traffic. What does not have that traffic is Mastodon, right? Right now, at least. Even though it's a much better deployment, that's another social networking platform. Or and different platforms give you different things. But even though there's a larger debate happening at present that whether they perform a public function, essentially you should think about them like as malls, right? And in several ways. Number one, they increase your desire to purchase things. Number two, they'll make you go around in circles again and again. And keep within them. But most importantly, they are commercial venues and they will throw you out the minute you say free debate. Okay? That's not to say the government won't, but any other advocacy which even may be palatable, like environmental, etc., unless you have prior permission and tie-ups, it's a private space, just like Twitter and Facebook is, which is why they're so authoritarian with respect to their policies, and yet they always say we are being ethical, we are doing community policing, we were trying to make a better environment. So of course, but the thing is, if you're arguing that the direct constitutional doctrine of freedom of speech and expression should apply to them the way it applies to, let's say, a state board which writes down a textbook which like fake news, right? You're expecting a very different thing. So you can't go to Facebook and say, hey, guys, because of the Constitution of India, you need to scrub all this fake news from my news feed. But you can go to the High Court and say that the state board examination is without a credible basis in fact, putting all of this gunk in the school textbook for kids.
So basically, again, it falls in that same private space where you...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the thing is, the divisions are also a bit vague when one gets into that a little deeply. And in fact, one of my friends, Gautam Bhati, has written an entire book on freedom of speech and expression. He's in fact even exploring whether, this is a bit provocative, whether the public-private divide is artificial. In several ways. But that's another conversation. It's a very advanced conversation. But his basic hypothesis is that state permits certain facilities for individuals to aggregating themselves and then give certain carve-outs when it can't fulfill those activities by itself. So, socialistic hai, but it's a very interesting way of looking at this as well. Because here's the thing. Certain societies and housing societies discriminate so badly against people, right? And you are always wishing that your fundamental rights would apply to them.
That's true.
I think that's another conversation, but
no pets in the lift is another conversation.
No, I mean, another one of the things that we wanted to talk about was, so far, Apar, we've talked about it from the legal perspective, the constitutional perspective, and so on and so forth. But then, like you keep saying, freedom of speech is beyond the letter of language. It's also an attitude. It's the way we perceive the world. And increasingly, we are noticing this pushback against some of it. For instance, in like public spaces, like for instance, universities, especially not in India as much as maybe in the West so far, where you had pushback against a certain type of speaker. Like, we all know that university campuses are very ultra-liberal places or, a bit radical in their thought process, etc. And there have been instances where you have speakers, mostly of the conservative mindset, whose speaking appointments have been cancelled. And they have turned around and said, oh, my freedom of speech is being trampled on, or, I have not been allowed to express. Do you think that's a valid argument for them to make if the people who are supposed to listen to them say that they don't want to?
Here's the thing. We can't always... See, here's the thing. We lose... So, I'm a big admirer of the American Civil Liberties Union. Okay, I've read multiple books on them. There's one book called The Taming of Free Speech. Okay, so the ACLU was originally a communist organization which was meant for workers who would picket outside factories, but was losing all court battles. Its first generation leadership generally, which was from different groups before the ACLU was formed, because there was also anti-war, they were jailed, some of them were killed. And then James Baldwin comes in and new leadership comes in and they espouse principle. They say that hum jeetenge when we can increase our fold and we say freedom of speech irrespective of the speech that you make, right? So it will increase a larger amount of people. Of course, there's a very interesting power dynamics here where people who are better resourced than others can completely hijack this. For instance, primetime TV news, right? And but they're doing it otherwise as well, without free speech expression standing in the way. And what's happening on the flip side is the restrictions by themselves are being counterintuitively applied against those very people it is supposed to protect. The licensing conditions which would prohibit these kind of really inflammatory broadcasts which are reducing minorities to a subhuman level, they are being permitted, whereas people with upstanding credentials of journalism are just not being given TV broadcast licenses. And here's the thing. You need to stand up for principle and support the most unpopular causes for that to happen. And the ACL has done it time and time again. So if you look at the case of Brandenburg versus the state of Ohio, where they defend the right of neo-Nazis to bear arms in a rally without brandishing them in an aggressive manner, etc., but just carrying them, right? So you increase the constituency, and the clear and imminent danger test actually arises from that case. So principle emerges from that, and that is then used by campaigners also from the Jewish Anti-Defamation League, from the NAACP. So it's used by the African Americans, the Jewish community, etc., etc. Of course, there's stains with respect to moral stains, legal stains in how minorities have been, especially being targeted as being due to free speech. But closing down free speech, especially in campuses, is problematic. One other person I'd like to just reference here is Nadine Strossen, who's the former president of the American Civil Liberties Union. She's written 2 excellent books, one on pornography and the other one on hate speech. The hate speech one came out very recently, and it's called Hate Speech. I've written a review on Goodreads for that, as well as on a book on pornography. So please do read it. And she's written a specific article where she says that the exploration of thought, ideas by itself, becomes much more resilient when we expose ourselves to opposing forces. Of course, this is not an argument for the YouTube algorithm, which needs to be fixed, because if you do go to a specific Jordan Peterson video just for research purposes, it will flood you with more and more extreme content till you come out of that rabbit hole actually being the best friend of Donald Trump. Okay? And wearing a MAGA hat. So here's the thing. This is a complex conversation. But to your larger point, Joel, I would say that freedom of speech means nothing if it does not mean that it shouldn't be permitted to people from the right wing. And this actually feeds a sense of insecurity and historic victimization, which they in any ways feel and they champion and they parrot, and which also then leads to charges of liberal hypocrisy. Yet at the same point of time, I'll make it very clear, there should be no shelter and no quarter for hate speech. If you say kill XYZ people from that community, the place for that person is the jailhouse.
So basically, if you had to sum it up, it would be like okay with all sorts of views, but as long as they are not extremist, violence-inducing.
Yeah, violence-inducing. It's a physical conduct, but also if you look, so Waldron says a different thing. Jeremy Waldron, he says that it can even be subtle forms. For instance, racist imagery, for instance, with Jews with respect to their noses, was a subracial context in which they were shown to be inferior. So it's contextual also sometimes. It may not immediately be a call for violence. Or if you look at Manoj Mitta's work much more closely with respect to the anti-Sikh riots in India, in a book that he co-authored with Mr. Fulka, or the 2002 riot book as well. If you look at both of those books, his primary hypothesis is that a very high-level state functionary makes a provocative statement such as when a tree falls, the ground shakes, or in 2002, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, where there's a tacit endorsement, ki jao maro, that basically it's fair game, go and take reprisal. So, Tushar, a bit of distinction here. It can always be masked, it can be subhumanizing. And I think, which is why free expression is a complex topic and we are just chatting about it.
So that's the university thing, I'm always confused. So is it okay for the mainstream head of the KKK to come?
Of course.
I heard it's wrong, but like, I don't know.
But also, here's the argument. See, the university is free to do, if it's a public university and codes of practice, etc., there need to be responsible disclosures. There needs to be also there needs to also be a actual honest assessment whether you are platforming a voice and providing them a venue and prominence they do not have. But if they do have it, to expose it to a competing crowd and idea in which it can be objectively analyzed. And a thing which happens with extremism and extremist ideology of any hue, and if you look at even the communist ideology, for instance, in Cambodia with what Pol Pot did, right? It's fact independent. It is its own country in reason. And here's the thing. You need to actually make people hear these things and then allow another person who has the standing, the skill, and the preparation to actually destroy it. And I would urge viewers, or listeners here, to actually go and look at the context behind how Gore Vidal took on that guy. What's Jeff Buckley? He prepared for a long time because Buckley was just parroting of these nonsense things in high rhetoric. And Gore Vidal actually prepared for it. So there are ways you can encounter it, even with a person who's spurning really extremist ideology and statements. And here's the thing. If you stop engaging with such things, it does not make them go away. In fact, it makes them more legitimate. And this is that kind of real human tick we have, right? That it makes somebody an underdog and people start vouching for them.
Intrigue comes along.
Yeah. So I do think that there's on campuses, but here's the thing. I would also say that the students are the most important people. If they do feel threatened by a speaker, there needs to be much more democratic basis to decision making here, in which I do think that students do have the level of maturity. And I do think that, and I've lectured in law schools before as well, that people who do lecture, they come with a sense of power. So if you come with a sense of power and with your own ideas, of course, they're not going to engage in a level of debate because they actually are very intelligent. Anyone's intelligent. They know that you're coming with a bias then. So it needs to be a much more open forum. And for instance, even if you invite the head of the KKK, you will invite the head of the Jewish Anti-Defamation League, then NAACP next time. And you will also put up a fact check each time the KKK head says something and contextualize it, right? So that all of that doesn't display political ideology. It shows the diversity of views which are there. So I would say that this can be done. Of course, if it's a very recognized hate group by itself, I really don't know, which is sprouting very, very wild. But here, it's a complex debate. I would say that freedom of expression is the rule. Restriction is the exception. We all need to be more tolerant. I try in my own public practice to be more tolerant, but I know certain things irritate me, like the name of this show. Tushar, what's up with that?
I will just blame Joel for it.
Yeah, that was my idea. Yeah. No, but, one of the things that I did want to, earlier on when we were talking about freedom of expression and summing it up, and you said that basically freedom of expression ends where there is threat of violence, right? Where violence is induced. Have you noticed that how in India that is used as an excuse to curb freedom of expression? Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah. But the thing is that here police does not even prevent violence. It stands beside when violence is happening.
That's something that I've always noticed, Like in Bombay, we live in Bombay, some film will come out where people are like, have issues with the subject matter. And then you'll have protests outside theaters, and then they'll break like theaters and stuff like that, and the cops are hanging around. And that's the reason that the authorities will give, saying, "Oh, this film is provoking violence, so we will ban it."
The standard law and order excuse.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah, man.
So
Rumor mongering.
What is the justification for that, though?
Rumor mongering.
No, but what is the justification for that? Yeah.
The justification
when people will ban a film.
So, film bans are a complex thing. So, like, I appeared in one film ban which was done when Pehlaj Nilani was then, and this was this was a thing about Arvind Kejriwal, right? Okay, and like no fan of the Kejri stuff. Okay, like full disclosure. And since I tweeted out, I'll say it. Yeah. I do believe that there's strains of proto-fascism in the Aam Aadmi Party, which was before fascism. Okay, but they show his early journey. It's very inspirational. I, in fact, like that movie. And Khushbu Ranka made it alongside that kid, forgetting, but he's also very talented. Both of them were co-directors. Got stuck, got banned. Like nonsensical things, and then, the banning process is such: when you file a appeal, you need to rent a theater in which the appellate board sits first, views the movie, and then you argue before them. It's what do I
seriously
say?
In the theater?
Bole to bole kya, kare to kare kya, baji
And watch it on a laptop or what?
Seriously, I don't know. So here's the thing, film censorship is something which is a passion project for me. I've even written an entire essay in seminar on how you notice all these disclaimers just becoming more and more chunky, and like all these different types. First it was don't smoke, now it's don't drink, now it's stand up for the national anthem, and next I don't know what comes next. I really don't know. But they blur scenes, they beep stuff. So I think there's a large amount of invasion, artistic and creative liberty in individual viewing choices. It's infantilizing people. It's presuming you to be a child. And if you go through, it's just not making sense any longer what is freedom of speech and what is not. Because freedom of speech seems to be aligned much more with power and expression of power than it is there with creativity, which quite often is individualized. It's based on a whim, right? It's not only about speaking truth to power, right? It's in that idealized sense. It's sometimes just being by yourself. And right, as Hannah Arendt says, the totalitarian state is called totalitarian because it wants to vest all aspects of your life within itself, that you can't exist beyond it. To me, freedom of speech means that we can do a bit of rumor mongering. Kya jata hai? Matlab, if you think a bagel is good ya vada pav acha udhar se milta hai, you'll do rumor mongering.
Also, isn't like gossiping also rumor mongering only, like when two people sit around and talk about a third person?
There is no law which prevents you from rumor mongering, guys. There is a law under section 505 of the Indian Penal Code, which is when you false with a criminal intention, you spread a false rumor in order to incite people to act in a certain way, usually to cause violence and public disorder. That basically, if you start shouting fire falsely in a theater, or you basically create a very snazzy WhatsApp saying that people of a certain community are being targeted there with certain doctored things which come on cell phones these days, those kind of things, then that section applies. But not like ordinary rumor mongering or lying, because we lie all the time to each other, to our friends, I don't. I'm a lawyer. Okay. But you guys do, I'm pretty sure.
Apar, I'm gonna trigger you now. What are your views on censorship of OTT platforms?
Oh my God, you know this. Why is this a trigger? Because I'm a no censorship guy, you know that, right? It's based on the joint account I have with Tushar on Netflix, in which he knows I've watched the third season of Dark. No, that's not the reason. The reason is that I've written quite publicly about it, that I do not want personally, and the organization that I work at, Internet Freedom Foundation, has also done substantial amount of work where it does not want the TV experience that you have come to your online streaming platforms. And it can. And TV streaming has gotten so bad. I've seen a breast cancer advert basically for promoting awareness, where breast is beeped out and they write chest.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I think it was this comedian Supriya Joshi. She was on a show on one of these channels, and she did a comedy bit about periods and breasts and pads, sanitary pads. They beeped out the word periods. So your whole topic.
You can put a full stop there, right? Oh, sorry, such another uncle joke. Okay.
It's like everyone's like, what did we watch? It's absurd. Dude,
I
think
can't
about-
tell you. Yeah, I can't tell you. You know, and here's the thing. You know, this comedy channel used to be there, which used to have all these stand-up things which used to play, which were retelecasts from the United States, Comedy TV or something like
Central,
that.
Comedy Central.
Yeah, it got banned. Yeah.
Yeah. And for some ups, not even like a. I remember it was one of these random shows, these prank shows or something.
Yeah, bilkul. So here's the thing, yeah. This same thing is going to happen with online streaming if we don't push back against. A lot of people say, "Oh, self-regulation is going to save us." I'm like, self-regulation, boss. Do you know what it is? Self-regulation is called the Standards and Practices Department. Standard and Practices Department क्या होता है? एक चैनल का उसके अंदर लोग बैठते हैं और ये बोलते हैं ये वर्ड्स डिक्शनरी में है जो आप यूज कर सकते हो और ये वर्ड्स आप नहीं यूज कर सकते और वो S&P डिपार्टमेंट आपके ऑनलाइन स्ट्रीमिंग पे लगे सो गेस व्हाट गाइस सीजन 4 डार्क हु विल वॉच इट
Nobody.
द पर्सन हु हैज अ VPN
Yeah, clearly.
which works
I think Joel can write a book on standards and practices.
Oh, dude, that entire time I was doing that show, it was just me constantly fighting with standards and practices. You know, okay. But to be fair, and this is something they were as willing to do stuff with us. Okay, it was not like.
No, they were really.
They were very accommodative, okay,
Yeah.
but yeah, and they were just trying their best too because we all exist in this very shit situation, right?
Yeah, man.
And they were trying their best also to push the envelope, while also at the same time not obviously. No, I don't blame them incurring
No, I don't blame
financial
the
losses
platforms. I don't blame the
like,
platforms. I do blame the government. Now, the thing is that right now the IMB minister, I think it's Jadvekar, right?
yeah.
No, it-
Jadvekar, if you Google Jadvekar and you put in Ministry of Information Broadcasting and abolish in Google, you'll come up with quotes in which he's saying the ministry should be abolished.
That would be a great
Really, why?
country.
Because he wanted
This minister.
because he wanted to vote dummies and you voted for him. And now he's the minister. No, but it's true, guys. Like, it's there with the Congress as well. It's there with the BJP. Everyone thinks it's a ministry which should not exist ideally. But the minute they get in power, they're like, oh, wow, this is really important. Look what I have in my hand.
That's the same.
This reminds me of that 1962 war ka report, which every government says they will release the moment they come into government. Then they're like, "Acha nahi guys, release nahi kar sakte."
Yeah, there's always that, no? Or even those documents under the Official Secret Act that are supposed to be this massive conspiracy concerning the death of Subhash Chandra Bose.
Yeah.
Never
Or
released.
should I really
Yeah, those
think of
also
people?
never.
One
never.
word. Lokpal. You guys think that man.
We do have it on paper. We do have it on paper.
Yeah, that's where it is.
Yeah, that's where it is.
No, but yeah, online streaming is a very creative space. It has core distinction from television. The viewing experience is different. I think most people watch it on their mobiles. I don't know why, or like, yeah, a lot of people watch it on their mobiles. I think the viewing experience sucks there, but it's private, right? It's not like the 1980s or 1990s ki matlab, if Titanic is playing and Jack is painting Rose, you're like, oh shit, mummy, papa bhi hai idhar, kya maine laga diya. Those kind of situations don't happen. And by the way, these were the situations which were complained again and again to government. Okay, that, oh my God, this happened. I was watching Big Boss and Sunny Leon came on. And then I caught my son watching porn and Googling Sunny Leon. And these are bad influences. You need to ban Big Boss right now. These are actual complaints.
My question is with regards to this banning of channels, is there no due process? Can just the government just ऐसे ही के mood वाला ban कर दिया?
There is due process, but here's the thing. The judges have basically made a distinction between text and video, in which they say that video impacts the human mind much more deeply, even though I know friends who watch 5 episodes and binge on it and don't even know the name of the main character.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, here's the thing. I don't know where lot of it emerges, but it's deeply biased. It's deeply flawed. It's unscientific. It's irrational, and it basically believes that we are perpetual 12-year-olds who need to be safeguarded against certain influences. Now, I do acknowledge that our cultural influences shape our thinking, but they're a very small part of that, yeah. And if they're really determining somebody's life to such a significant extent by itself, it needs to be done with other factors. For instance, there's this entire writing that how Ramayana as well as the Mahabharata serials played a part in the cultural renaissance of the right wing, right? And it kind of fed into the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. And there's great writing on that. But here's the thing. It also came from a basis of religious identity, of victimhood, of the existence of a temple which is no longer there. There's historical context to it. There is a communal context to it. And there is political organization and resources behind it. It's not like you watching Fleabag and just saying that, hey, okay, this is how I want to live my life, and I want to be this promiscuous, and this is the way. Like, you don't change yourself that dramatically, right? So I do think that we need to respect.
It is very little credit to human beings for the fact that they have multiple influences in their life and not just one.
Yeah, we are not children. Yeah, but like, do you guys have
even children? To be fair, even children pick up from various sources.
Young adults. Should I say young adults? Young adults. We are not young adults.
But this is really my nightmare. I think as for both Joel and I, both of us who work in that digital space, it's a scary thought, man.
So
we're already doing a lot of self-censorship anyway, because you are always like, "Arey, case ho jayega, ye ho jayega, kuch na kuch ho jayega."
Yeah, so Tushar, if you go on Twitter and you want to look at our work, okay, and others want to do as well, hey, it's not really legal in the sense that it's complex, but you can understand more about this debate. You just need to put in the hashtag #LetUsChill, okay, in Twitter, and all the work we have done, all the representations, the cases we are part of with regard to how censorship may happen, and we are trying to prevent it from creeping in on online streaming platforms, where a lot of us are deriving a lot of joy during this pandemic. Yeah, guys, please do look it up if you have interest.
So guys, check out.
Definitely will.
What's it? Let us chill.
Hashtag let us chill. Yeah.
So everyone, check out Internet Freedom Foundation and check out hashtag let us chill on Instagram.
Yeah, and if you can just put the Instagram post, we also make a lot of storyboards, explainers. We work with comic artists because our belief is that we actually utilize freedom of speech a lot, and we actually feel that it's the political value. So here's the thing: with a lot of things going digital now, we have a chance. I think so. We have a fresh chance. Okay. A lot of shit which has happened for 70 years, okay? And in some ways, this Naya Bharat thing is true, right? Because you have 650 million active internet connections, people coming online for the first time, and you have so much opportunity to build anew. So you also have the freedom of speech anew, right? So it doesn't need to be a continuation of this really sad story, which is predetermined for, because you have online streaming right now, and it is showing us things we never saw before. And I mean in very engaging and nice ways as well, including documentaries on nature, right? So the thing is that please do engage with us and do link to our Instagram handle and check out, because I do think that the larger narrative is optimistic. With more people coming online, we have seen a porn ban being reversed, but then being restated sadly. But guys, if people can come together in India and voice outrage or porn being blocked, it means we are shedding our hypocrisy. And then we can move to much more meaningful conversations about autonomy and consent.
That's going to be
also, I think that considering right from the start, the internet has been relatively free. And once you've experienced the freedom, it's difficult to just take it away with no fight. Is that me being too optimistic? Or
but Joel, the problem is we're in a phase in our country right now where a decision that the government takes is supported by a giant online infrastructure and a giant TV infrastructure that is very hell-bent on making you just believe it कि ये सही चीज है.
Yeah, so we need
Yeah,
a lot of,
I suppose.
yeah, we need a lot of beanstalks. We need a lot of Jills, a lot of Jacks. Yeah, we need like homegrown like people. But yeah, I get your point here. I think infrastructure bottlenecks are a big part of that. I also think that the modern censorship technologies are much more in terms of fragmenting our attention, flooding our timelines, confusing us, where we can't direct our sense of mind and either for individual cravings or for any kind of meaningful social interaction, do it as per a level of autonomy. It has to do with platform design because the best minds of our generation truly work in tech companies to retain us on those platforms, make them more addictive, exploit our psychological flaws. From voice recognition softwares, Alexa has so many PhDs who work on voice training to make it sound more natural or not sound too natural as well. Okay, as for various dialects, you have people who choose the right kind of blue, which is geo-targeted for certain people. The people who know which football club will have which political affinity, and all of this data is just going into a massive profile where this stew is used to basically just hook you and addict you to it. So yeah, there are those problems. I think those are threats, but this is a larger story of opportunity. I do think that, guys, how bad can it get? Really, like, let's. We're in the middle of a pandemic.
Stop it.
Please.
Stop it. Don't ask these questions.
Please, guys, let's be optimistic. Okay, let's be unrealistic.
No. I've stopped asking myself this question: how bad can it get? Because every time it seems like rock bottom. Like, did you read 2 days ago or 3 days ago? There was a BBC story about another potential pandemic brewing.
Yeah.
I think from China again.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's all we needed. That's what I'm
never asking that question again.
Your Google alert must be configured to pandemic. My Google alert is configured to vaccine. Okay, so there are different ways of looking at the world now. Okay? The internet is giving you enough option. Joel, don't be that dark, please.
But damn, this was one of our more enlightening conversations that we had, Tushar.
Hopefully, I think we'll get people to sort of properly understand these concepts, because I'm so sick of people saying, "Arey, you are violating my freedom of speech." I'm like, no, I'm not.
I just muted you. No, I'm not. Like, I don't know you. You just abused me. I don't feel like talking to you anymore. No, you're violating my freedom of speech and expression. Guys, I can't tell you. You can just go through my conversations on my Twitter also and just see the kind of expectations people have. But here's the thing. I think the more these kind of shows happen, and please do send us the link. We'll also share that widely with our community.
Yes, of course.
I think they get a better sense of understanding, right? About what is freedom of speech and expression, what is not. And this is not to say I have all the answers or both of you will have all the answers. It's a conversation ultimately. There are certain core principles.
The point of the show is not to be like the definitive whatever, but just as a starting ground, for a starting place for someone who, because, our brains are also addled with such nonsense misinformation, right, about such basic things.
Yeah. Earth is flat.
Yeah, I mean, what is the meaning of freedom of expression? Or, any of the past episodes that we've done also, you have these nonsense opinions that people have, and just trying to understand that you're wrong, and here is a direction maybe for you to follow.
And Joel, that's all. The studies show people still don't care. So yeah,
that is true. I think part of this is us satisfying our own ego.
Yeah, which is all of us. Yeah, of course, most people love the sound of their own voice. Myself, I include myself in that as well. But it's important to listen. I think a core part of freedom of speech and expression these days is also to provide space to voices which have been socially neglected and to amplify them. And I think we all should do that through our work as well. But thanks for having me, guys. Like it's been a wonderful conversation. There was one part of the question you also wrote down that do you have any freedom of speech and expression jokes? There's a Ronald Reagan joke which I dug up, but I'll spare everyone.
No.
Yeah.
Now that you said it, now you have to. Yeah. You can't say I have a joke and then not say it.
It's a Ronald Reagan joke, guys. Really, like you want to bleed through your ears.
Some of our young listeners will also find out what a Ronald Reagan is.
Yeah, so please do. He's a very fascinating human being who's inspired a lot of people. Not me. Okay, but the Ronald Reagan joke goes like this. This is during the time of the Cold War, and his other famous line was, "Mr. Gorbachev, bring down this wall." He was like this kind of cowboy kind of look.
A Berlin Wall, yeah.
Yeah. So he has this joke. He says that I met several people in Russia, and I was inquiring what is the kind of fundamental rights you have, freedom of speech you have. And and I told them that an American can come outside the White House and they can shout and they can say that, hey, my president is an idiot or is a fool. Okay. And the Russian said, yes, we also have freedom of speech and expression in Russia. I can go outside the Kremlin and I can shout, the American president is an idiot. He's a fool. So yeah, that's the Ronald Reagan joke. Yeah, and I wrote that down specifically because you can't get more uncle than Ronald Reagan.
That is indeed a hallmark uncle joke.
Yes, it should. Uncle. I don't think so. It can be exceeded. I prepared for this show, guys. I researched for this show.
Apart, this podcast has peaked now. This podcast has peaked.
Okay.
Yeah, we were wondering, no.
Okay,
but thanks so much for coming on. Thanks so much for talking to us today.
Yeah, it's been pleasant. It's been like catching up with friends over a Zoom call, guys. Honestly, take care and have a wonderful series.
Also, before you leave, we just need to do one quick thing. Just read out to our audiences. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out our other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on IVM Podcast app or IVMPodcast.com. You can follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Apar, you are on Twitter and Instagram.
Apar 1984, that's because I was born that year, not the George Orwell book. Apar, APAR 1984, and my organization is the Internet Freedom Foundation. You can follow it at @Internet Freedom on Twitter.
And on Instagram, both the same handle?
Instagram @internetfreedom.in. Instagram is way better. It's handled by a much younger team.
Lovely. And if you'd like to talk, I am Yon OK Please on Twitter and Tushar_Abhi on Instagram. Joel, you are?
I am Pereira Joel on Twitter and joelpereira.esq on Instagram.
Lovely. That's it from us, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Hi guys, this is Ayushi.
And I am Ritasha.
And welcome to Agla Station Adulthood.
It's a fun podcast we've got going on and we'd love for you to tune in and enjoy with us.
Join us as we stop at various stations and discuss different topics that seem to be bothering us and hopefully
dating,
you as
relationships, beauty, just being an adult, lots of different things.
We don't have a great grip on it, but we've done okay so far.
Catch Agla Station Adulthood every Thursday on the IVM app, the IVM website, or wherever else you get your podcasts.
Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, Don Bradman, and now Cyrus Brocha. Okay, probably not in the right company. I mean, Don Bradman is Australian. But it's called Cyrus Says, a wonderful show about everything. Find the show on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts.